The alien engineers of Habitat L47 liked to joke that humans were the only species in the galaxy who could turn paranoia into architecture. And maybe they were right, because on the third rotation after arrival, when the colony dome was still settling into the dense shale bed beneath it, Nathan Hale, the only human structural specialist assigned to this backwater research moon, decided the base supports were too optimistic for his taste. Those were his exact words, optimistic, as if optimism were a structural flaw. To the Terethi engineers, it was adorable. To Nathan, it was a problem begging to become a tragedy. He stood knee-deep in dust, staring at the transparent curvature of the dome overhead. The alien material shimmered with a soft lavender iridescence, alive with pulsing nanofibers that registered internal stress and external pressure. Beautiful, elegant, technologically miraculous, and, in his view, underbuilt. Terethi chief engineer Vokri had the long, sleek silhouette typical of her species, elegant crystalline bones visible beneath thin, opalescent skin. She approached him with the polite patience reserved for a child who had glued the furniture to the ceiling. "Nathan," she said, accent frilled and melodic, "you have been staring at the dome supports for 48 minutes. Again, 49, he corrected. And they're shifting." She blinked. Terethi blinks weren't like human blinks. They rippled upward, like a curtain pulled by invisible fingers. It was charming the first few times. Now he recognized it as the engineering equivalent of a sigh. "The dome is designed to shift," she replied. "Flexibility prevents fracture." "Yes," Nathan agreed, rubbing dust from his palms. "But the ground here isn't behaving the way your survey predicted. There's microsettling along the western arc. Tiny now, but cumulative. We accounted for microsettling." "I don't think you accounted for this microsettling." Behind him lay the collection of materials he'd scrounged from supply crates: steel plates, tension anchors, carbon rebar, composite mesh. None of it Terethi, all of it, in Vokri's words. Primitive. She examined the pile with the kind of disdain usually reserved for biological waste. "This," she declared, "is unnecessary." "That's what they said about parachutes until gravity had an opinion." "Nathan," she groaned. In fairness, Nathan understood her frustration. Humans, statistically speaking, were the most structurally anxious species the Terethi had ever encountered. The galactic stereotype said, if a human enters a building, they will reinforce at least one wall before trusting it enough to sit down. And yes, Nathan had reinforced 3 walls of his personal quarters in the first week. But this wasn't paranoia, this was physics. He knelt and pressed his hand against the dusty ground. The tremor was faint, but present. A whisper of motion. The moon's crust was not as stable as the orbital surveys suggested. Maybe it never had been. Maybe the mining operation 3 kilometers south had awakened something dormant. Maybe the ground itself was quietly warning them. He didn't need maybes. He needed supports. "I'm building a secondary reinforcement system," he said calmly, "independent from your internal dome anchors. If the first line of supports fail, this buys us time." Vokri's frills stiffened. "You imply our supports will fail?" "No." Nathan looked her straight in the eye. "I imply that if they do, I don't want to be liquefied." A startled ripple of amusement traveled across her iridescent cheek plates. Terethi laughter sounded like low wind chimes. It was strangely beautiful, even when aimed at him. "You humans," she sighed, "always imagining catastrophe. It must be exhausting living in such fear." Nathan grinned. "It's not fear. It's preparation for everyone else's overconfidence." Her laugh deepened, resonating through her chest cavity. "Your primitive reinforcement will change nothing." "Great," he replied. "Then it won't bother you if I build it." She gestured at the empty open ground. "It is your time to waste." And with that, she glided away, leaving him alone with steel, tools, and the quiet, persistent tremor beneath his boots. He began working immediately. Humans lacked the graceful precision of Terethi engineers, but made up for it with stubbornness bordering on obsession. He drilled into the bedrock, planted anchors, positioned tension bars at precise angles, and began constructing a secondary wall that circled the dome like an old Earth fortress. Not tall, just reinforced, thick, dense, immovable. A ring of structural insurance the aliens found redundant at best, insulting at worst. By mid, several Terethi researchers had gathered to watch him like one might observe a pet doing something unintentionally amusing. "Look," whispered one, "he's building another wall." "Why?" another asked. "Because he is human." They chittered in laughter. Nathan ignored them. He worked until his muscles burned, until the sun dipped low, casting a reddish glow over the alien minerals embedded in the dust. Sweat plastered his shirt to his skin. His hands shook from fatigue. By the time he finished the first quarter of the reinforcement ring, he could hear the dome shifting again, flexing, adjusting, but beneath that, a deeper rumble, a longer vibration. He froze. He knelt again, palms flat. Yes, not imagined, not minor. A pressure shift, a movement under the crust, slow and wide and wrong. He stood, heart hammering. The aliens were still laughing, low and musical. Nathan stared at the dome's lower arc, watching as the lavender light pulsed faster, the system reacting to stress. Too fast. 2. Soon. He wiped the sweat from his brow. Oh hell, something was coming, something the aliens weren't prepared for. And suddenly, the second wall didn't feel paranoid at all. It felt necessary. It felt like hope. It felt like the only thing between them and disaster. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew. The dome was no longer stable, and everyone would learn that very, very soon. Nathan didn't sleep that cycle. Technically, he tried. He lay on his cot for 17 minutes, staring at the reinforced corner of his room while the dome's faint lavender glow seeped through the window. But the tremor beneath the ground pulsed like a heartbeat, too slow for a quake, too purposeful for settling. It had rhythm, it had intent, and every muscle in his body told him the intent wasn't friendly. By the time the artificial morning lights began warming the dome interior, Nathan was already back at the western sector, tightening bolts and checking the tension lines of his half-finished reinforcement ring. His muscles protested, his hands stung, his eyes burned. But the ground felt worse, unstable, irregular, restless. The first sign of trouble appeared not in the soil, but in the air, a faint metallic temps drifting across the habitat. Humans tasted ozone before electronics failed, a quirk Valkyrie once teased him for. Today, the tang was strong enough to tighten his jaw. Then came the second sign. The dome lights flickered. Not much, just a blink. A hiccup in the energy distribution. Terethi infrastructure was advanced, but nothing advanced enough avoided physics or geology. Nathan was securing a lateral support plate when he heard the familiar sound of crystalline footsteps approaching from behind. Human hold, Valkyrie called, voice clipped. Not melodic, not amused, clipped. That alone made him turn faster. We have detected unusual energy fluctuations within the lower dome lattice. Your human systems do not register them. They register them, he said, tightening another bolt. I just noticed them earlier than your sensors. She stiffened. Impossible. He gave her a flat look. Hydrated meatbags are surprisingly perceptive when death is the alternative. Valkyrie's frills twitched in irritation. You are making jokes at a time like this. You laughed at me yesterday. That was when the situation was normal. Nathan's grip faltered for a moment. So you admit it isn't normal anymore. Silence, the kind that answers a question without words. Valkyrie stepped closer to the dome wall, palms out, sensing the lattice through the iridescent material. Her skin refracted the lavender light into shimmering bands. The internal system is compensating for stress from beneath the ground. She murmured, this is deeper than settling. Yeah, Nathan said softly. It is. A younger Terethi technician ran toward them, his crystal-sharp movements uncharacteristically frantic. Chief engineer, the substructure monitors show increasing pressure from below. Sector Westry anchors are destabilizing. Valkyrie's voice sharpened. Impossible. Those anchors are reinforced with trilayer. They are destabilizing. The technician insisted, trembling. The data is clear. Nathan swallowed the urge to say, I told you so. He would save that luxury for a point where imminent death wasn't an open possibility. Instead, he nodded toward the ground. It's not going to stay quiet much longer. You need to start evacuating non-essential personnel. Valkyrie snapped her gaze at him. Evacuate. To where the outside atmosphere is unbreathable for your kind and barely survivable even for mine. Then evacuate them to the central strongpoint. It's the most structurally protected area inside the dome. Because you reinforced it, she said reluctantly. No, Nathan corrected. Because your engineers did a good job there. I'm the paranoid accessory. She didn't laugh. He didn't expect her to. Within 20 minutes the entire habitat was vibrating. Not shaking violently, worse, subtly, consistently, like something was pushing upward on the dome supports, testing them the way a predator tests the resistance of a cage. Terethi engineers rushed along the dome perimeter, projecting radiant holographic diagnostics that flickered with increasingly red warnings. A chorus of crystalline chimes filled the air, not laughter, but distress tones. Nathan worked faster. Every anchor he drove into the ground sent a shiver up his arms, as if the soil itself objected. He layered steel plates, mesh and tension arcs in overlapping patterns. Not artistic, not elegant. Human engineering rarely was. But it was stubborn. It was redundant. It was durable. It was built for the worst-case scenario, and the worst-case scenario was coming from the central command node. A low alarm boomed across the habitat. Terethi alarms were terrifyingly calm, long-rising tones that resonated like a morning hymn. Valkyrie appeared again, eyes wide and glassy, reflecting status readouts. Nathan, she said without preamble. We have discovered the cause. He didn't stop working. Let me guess. The ground is hollowing out under us. No, she said quietly. Something is moving under us. His blood turned to ice, moving as in fluid pressure, or movement, she stressed. Tectonic plates do not shift like this. Settling does not have velocity curves. He stopped tightening the bolt. How big? She hesitated. Valkyrie. How big? Her frills faded from iridescent blue to pale white, the Terethi equivalent of blanching. Large enough, she whispered, that your reinforcement ring may be the only thing preventing structural failure. Nathan cursed under his breath. And you laughed at this wall. I am not laughing now. A deeper tremor rolled beneath them, slower, but with more force. Dust shook loose from the dome edges. The lavender nanofiber lattice brightened to a warning pulse. The technician from earlier sprinted toward them again. "Chief, the southern anchors are beginning to shear." Valkyrie's composure cracked. "Shear already. Structural stress is exceeding design tolerance by 35%. Nathan threw his wrench aside. "We need to brace the primary anchor cluster." Now Valkyrie looked at him helplessly. "The cluster is too deep. We cannot reach it. Not without what? Without breaching the dome." Nathan inhaled sharply. A breach meant death. For humans, instantly. For Terethi, eventually. There was no coming back from that decision. "Unless we don't fix the primary cluster," Nathan said slowly. "We support it externally." Valkyrie stared. "Externally? With what?" He gestured at his wall. "Thick, crude, ugly human. With this you mean your ring of primitive supports?" "Yes. You intend to use your wall to reinforce our entire dome substructure?" "Yes, that is." She searched for a word. "Reckless." "Reckless is not acting," he said. "This is engineering." Another tremor hit harder. This time the dome visibly flexed, the lavender lattice distorting in a ripple that raced overhead like a shockwave. A collective gasp rose from around the habitat, then a sound they'd never heard before. Distant, deep, a rumbling groan. Something alive, grinding against the bedrock. Valkyrie's composure shattered. "Entirely, Nathan," she whispered. "Is your wall finished?" He exhaled, sweat dripping from his chin. "Not yet." Her frills flattened against her skull. "How long?" "Too long," he said honestly. "Unless I get help." She blinked rapidly, trembling. "You want Terethi engineers to assist with the human design?" "I want everyone who wants to keep breathing to pick up a damn anchor and start reinforcing." Valkyrie didn't hesitate again. She turned to the gathered engineers and shouted, not musically, not gracefully, but with raw fear, "Assist the human, now." The ground roared beneath them. The dome strained. Nathan grabbed another support beam, and the alien engineers who had once mocked him now sprinted to help build the only thing that might save all of them. His wall. His primitive human, stubborn wall. The only thing standing between life and collapse. The next hour unfolded in a blur of movement, shouted commands, clattering tools, and the rising, bone-deep hum of a habitat fighting for its life. The tremors grew more frequent, stronger, less like geological pressure, and more like Athen refused to finish that thought. Not yet. Not while he needed every neuron dedicated to the brutally simple act of survival. The Terethi engineer swarmed his half-built reinforcement ring with frantic purpose. It was almost surreal watching them work on human materials. Their slender crystalline fingers, built for manipulating sleek alien alloys, now gripped heavy steel and carbon rebar with awkward determination. They looked like musicians suddenly handed primitive drums, but they learned fast. Valkyrie herself worked beside Nathan, her iridescent skin dulling each time the ground rumbled. Her elegance was gone. She was sweating, trembling, and very much alive in a way he had never seen. She didn't float or glide. She hauled, shoved, braced, and she didn't laugh once. Nathan drove a shock anchor into the soil with a sledgehammer. The vibration shot up into his arms, a deeper vibration, one not caused by him, pushed back. He grimaced. "That's not good." Valkyrie tightened a bolt nearby. "Be specific." "When the ground pushes back," he said, swinging again, "it means something is pressurizing it from underneath." "Pressurizing with what?" she demanded. He stopped, looked at her. The tremor beneath their feet pulsed again. "I don't think it's a what." Valkyrie's expression collapsed into pure dread. Before she could reply, a deafening alarm split the air. Not the calm, rising Terethi warning tone. Not even the human klaxons they rarely used. This was the dome itself, shrieking. Lavender light flared across the curved ceiling as the nanofiber lattice entered full emergency strain mode. The entire dome shuddered as if something enormous had struck its underside. Engineers stumbled, tools fell, dust rained down in thin curtains. The youngest Terethi technician screamed. "Sector South 1 stress limit exceeded. We're approaching critical." He didn't finish. A fracture line erupted across the lower dome, thin branching, pulsing with panicked violet light. Every Terethi throat emitted a harmonic shriek. Nathan felt his stomach drop. The fracture wasn't on the external shell. It was in the internal support layer. The part they couldn't access. The part that was supposed to never fail. His ring needed to be finished now. He grabbed Valkyrie's shoulder. "We need tension beams on the entire western arc. That'll redistribute load long enough for the ring to take the pressure." "We are running out of time," she cried. "Then work faster." More Terethi engineers joined them. A teen now, then 20, then 30. Researchers, technicians, even non-engineering staff arrived, grabbing tools with shaking hands. Nathan barked orders, pointed, corrected. The aliens obeyed without hesitation. It was the first time in his career that an entire engineering team had listened to him without debate. Another tremor struck, violent enough that people fell. The ground beneath a reinforcement wall bulged upward, then sank slightly, like something enormous shifting position. Valkyrie pushed herself to her feet. "Nathan, this is not tectonic." "No kidding," he panted. "Plate movement doesn't come with mood swings." A crackling boom echoed beneath them, not from the dome, from the ground. Every instinct Nathan had ever trusted screamed one truth. It was coming up. He drove another anchor down, shouting, "We need cross-bracing on the east side, and triple beam layering on the northwest." Engineers sprinted to obey. Terethi hands placed steel plates. Nathan tightened them. Aliens hammered in human brackets. Nathan adjusted tension on their alloy clamps. Species that had laughed at each other's designs now built, side by side with desperate synchronization. Then the dome strained, again so violently that the entire habitat tilted half a degree. They all felt it. Tools rolled across the ground. A Terethi researcher fell against Nathan, who pushed them aside just in time to avoid a falling support beam. The fracture line above them expanded slowly but continuously, like a glowing wound. Valkyrie stared in horror. If the lattice fails, the external shell will crack under pressure. Nathan wiped sweat from his brow. "Which is why we're building a replacement foundation before it collapses." Her voice shook. "Your wall is not meant to support an entire dome." "No," he agreed, "but combined with your lattice, it might hold long enough to stop the worst of the failure." "Might. That's engineering for please pray." Valkyrie made a panicked chime halfway between a gasp and a sob. "Humans are insane. Only when we have to be." Another subterranean boom cut off her reply. This one closer, louder, more deliberate. Then the ground swelled. Not a tremor, a rise, a bulging, lifting wave of earth directly beneath the dome's western edge that it rose half a meter before falling again, slamming down with such force that several Terethi fell to their knees. A horrified silence followed. Nathan whispered, "That wasn't pressure. That was movement." Valkyrie forced herself upright. "Nathan, what is under us?" He didn't answer. He didn't want to. But the truth loomed beneath their boots. Undeniable now. Something massive was tunneling beneath the habitat. Something alive. Something old. Something the survey drones had missed or avoided or mistaken for static geology. Another bulge. Larger this time. The dome buckled inward. "Lavender," Lattice screamed. Terethi fled toward the central strongpoint, but Valkyrie stayed. Her voice cracked. "Nathan, your wall." He looked at the structure they had nearly completed. Not elegant. Not advanced. Not beautiful, but solid. Thick. Human. Stubborn down to its atoms. "It'll hold," he said. "How do you know?" Her voice trembled, almost breaking. He tightened the last tension bolt with every ounce of strength he had left. "I don't," he admitted. "But it's better than giving up." The ground roared, no longer muffled, no longer distant like the earth itself was exhaling. A massive shape pushed upward, cracking the soil. Nathan grabbed Valkyrie and pulled her back behind the newly finished section of the wall. "Get ready," he whispered. "For what?" She whispered back. He stared at the bulging earth, heart pounding. "For the thing you said was impossible." The dome groaned, the ground split, and something colossal began to rise. The ground tore open with a sound like a mountainside inhaling, grinding, violent. Soil exploded upward in a shower of grit and broken rock. A shadow rose beneath the dome, impossibly large, blotting out the lavender glow. The shock wave rippled through the habitat floor, sending Terethi and humans sprawling behind support beams and half-finished bracings. Nathan shoved Valkyrie down, just in time, as a jagged slab of stone whistled past her head and shattered against the new reinforcement wall. The wall didn't budge, a good sign. A desperately needed one, but the thing emerging from the ground wasn't done. Soil around the bulge heaved again, cracking wider, spiraling outward like a web. The dome lattice flickered in pain, its nanofibers pulsing in frantic violet streaks. The fracture line raced another meter across the dome's interior. If the creature pushed the dome directly, it would tear through it like tissue. Nathan scrambled to his feet, pulling Valkyrie with him. They backed against the reinforced ring. His heart slammed against his ribs hard. Enough to hurt. He'd expected something big. He hadn't expected something ancient. A segmented mineral, black and ridged like obsidian armor, broke through the earth. Plates the size of hovercars covered in glossy crystalline patterns rose into view beneath them, moving with slow inevitability. Where tendrils or limbs Nathan wasn't sure, jointed like stone, flexing with a grinding of granite. It was a burrower, a colossal one. Valkyrie's voice trembled. This species is extinct. It should be extinct. Tell it that," Nathan muttered. The creature shifted, testing the air inside the dome with a proboscis-like appendage of iridescent mineral filaments. Its motion wasn't chaotic, but curious, slow, deliberate, dragged from eras past by some ancient instinct. The tremors weren't random. The creature had been rising all along, not attacking, hunting, just emerging, unaware of the world above it had changed, and that it was about to crush an entire habitat by accident. "Nathan," Valkyrie whispered, "if it stands fully upright, it will pierce the dome." He saw it, the way the creature unfurled, the way its armored crest rose like the prow of a ship approaching the surface, and he saw how little time they had left. "Okay," Nathan said, "we're not stopping it." "Then we die," Valkyrie whispered. "No, we guide it." Her eyes widened. "Guide that? With what?" Nathan pointed to the ring wall. "With a funnel. You want to use your primitive wall," she said slowly, "to redirect an ancient megafauna titan that predates our recorded history." "Yep, you are terrifying, so I've been told." The creature rose another meter. The dome shrieked. The fracture widened. Violet light flared painfully bright. Nathan sprinted along the wall, shouting to the Terethi engineers who had not yet fled. Hold the north arc. Reinforce the angle. We're turning this thing. The aliens stared at him, stunned. Vokhr. I found her voice before they did. Do as he says. Now, the engineers moved. Terrified, trembling, but moving. Nathan slammed into the east section of the wall, braced his shoulder and yelled, push the braces inward, tighten tension lines. We angle the wall, give it a path of least resistance. Toward where? Vokhr demanded. Toward the southern trench. He shouted, it's the only thing deep enough to let it keep rising without hitting the dome. She stared. You want to lead it out under the dome? Not under, Nathan corrected. Around. Vokhr blinked rapidly, processing, calculating, panicking and understanding all at once. We cannot build fast enough. We don't have to, he said. We just have to force it to prefer the path we give it. Another rumble. Stronger. The creature rose higher. Its mineral crest scraped the dome, sending fractures spiderwebbing across the glowing surface. The dome began to sag. Nathan. Someone screamed. He didn't look. He knew. The dome was seconds from catastrophic failure. He grabbed a steel tension cable, wrapped it around a support post and heaved. Vokhr grabbed the line beside him, her delicate crystalline arms shaking violently with the strain. Other Terethi joined, some engineers, some researchers, even a medic still wearing trauma bands around her wrists. They all pulled together, angling the reinforcement wall, tightening the improvised funnel. The creature shifted again, and this time, the wall held. The entire structure groaned under the pressure, but it didn't collapse. Instead, anchor plates bit into the ground, forcing the creature's rising bulk to tilt slightly, just a fraction toward the direction Nathan wanted. Yes, Nathan gasped again. Pull, pull. They pulled. The wall bowed slightly. The rings cinched tighter. The creature adjusted its path, choosing the angled corridor instead of the straight ascent. It moved like a mountain, shrugging its way to freedom as it shifted southward. The strain on the dome eased. Not much, but enough. The fractures slowed there. Expansion. The lavender glow dimmed from emergency blinding white back to a panicked violet. The dome held. Nathan nearly collapsed from relief, but he forced himself upright and kept shouting commands. More angle on the southwest side. Reinforce. Don't let it drift. The creature pushed through the ring's funnel, obeying physics more than intention. The path they'd carved, crude, last-minute human and alien mixed, became a channel, guiding a giant. The ground sank toward the southern trench. The creature followed the gradient. And finally it slid fully out of the dome's foundation zone, its massive crest dipping beneath the dome's edge. A final ground-shaking shudder, then silence. Real silence, not tremor silence, not tense silence, just stillness. The creature tunneled deeper into the southern trench, disappearing into the moon's crust like an ancient god returning to sleep. The dome dimmed again, returning to its natural lavender glow. The fractures stabilized, held in place by the combined lattice and the reinforcement ring. Nathan sagged to his knees, muscles trembling. Vokhr collapsed beside him, her crystalline body heaving in panicked breaths. Around them, the remaining Terethi engineers stared in stunned disbelief. After a minute, Vokhr spoke, voice hoarse and small. Nathan Hale. She turned her head toward him. We should have built 3 of your primitive walls. Nathan laughed. Actually laughed. A bright, exhausted bark of human triumph. Well, he panted. Next time, maybe trust the paranoid guy. Vokhr's iridescent frills shimmered weakly. I trust you completely, even if your structures give me heart palpitations. They were supposed to. She managed a tiny chime of amusement, the first since the crisis began. Around them, Terethi engineers approached the human-built ring wall, touching it with reverence and disbelief. One of them whispered, "It saved us." Another said, "His design, simple, but strong, adaptable." Vokhr nodded slowly. "Human engineering," she murmured, "always expecting the worst, so that everyone else survives it." Nathan sucked in a shaky breath. "That's kind of our thing." She looked at him, soft and sincere. "Nathan Hale, your primitive reinforcements saved an entire habitat." He looked up at the dome, fractured, battered but standing. Then he looked at the wall, stubborn human. Then at her. "We built it together," he said, and for once, the alien who had laughed at him said nothing in reply. She simply placed her crystal hand against his human palm, meeting shimmering alien skin, acknowledging him not as a nuisance, not as a paranoid outlier, but as the engineer who saved her world.